Welcome to another episode of the Iron Forge podcast. This is a podcast where I interview clients, entrepreneurs, team members, and investors to hear their unique take on entrepreneurship and the startup community. My name is Chris Roach. I'm, of course, your host, and I'm delighted to say that I am joined this week by one of our more long-standing clients, ex-professional athlete, former US rugby professional, and true trailblazer in the fitness and personal well-being industry, Mr. Brian Doyle. Welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Thank you very much, Chris. It's wonderful to be here.
I know I've been looking forward to this one. I'm excited to dive into this and really kind of dive into your background and what led you to entrepreneurship. To start off with, if you don't mind, just Brian, where are you from? What is your company? If you have an elevator pitch, just to kind of give those listening a bit of a background on your company.
Sure. Yeah. So I am from Rockland County, New York, just outside of New York City. Little background on myself. I was a rugby player. Played for the U.S. national team, had a knee injury, which the rehab process inspired an idea to bring to market a tool, so a board that basically taught people how to properly engage their core and to mobilize their body at the same time. So essentially, what started off as an innocent hardware idea has now turned into a connected technology platform where we feel like we're trailblazing in the areas of mind-body connection as it relates to core training.
Awesome. And for those that are obviously listening and can't see right now, we will put some videos below on this podcast as well, and we'll put some images of the podcast of the AXIUS board as well, so you can see that. I can tell you firsthand, we've been using it as we are developing the application for it. It kills you. I mean, it is hard to use. I consider myself quite fit, and I've been playing around with it over the last week and a half, and it is tough. I mean, is it something that for rehab is one thing? Have you been using it obviously to stay fit, and do you see the potential to be able to use it just as a truly challenging machine to be able to use?
Yeah, it's funny because when I started out with the concept, there was some real why behind the initial design of why I was doing the things I was doing. So just to give listeners some context, it is a ball inside of a cup, and there is a board around it. So it sort of looks like the planet Saturn, right? Like a crude planet Saturn, right? And on one side, it rolls around any direction, and it's very unstable. And then if you flip it over, it's simply, which we call it the dome side down. So you have the ball side down on the rolly side, and then the dome side down is a less stable side. And there's different hand and grip placements that allow you to interact with the board differently to create different stimuluses in the body. And it's funny, I would say my understanding of my own body has greatly grown since inventing this product. I started off with the correct level of thinking in terms of why we were doing it, which, the basic why is instability helps to heighten your body's neuromuscular response, which is just a fancy way of saying we're able to turn on core or stabilizing muscles, small muscles in your body. And at the same time, we're able to lengthen and mobilize your body. And that combination of turning on stabilizers and lengthening and mobilizing your body does some really amazing things that, as I dove deeper and deeper into the science, I've been able to use it for various reasons, whether that be a quick warm up, a mobility session to mobilize problem areas in the body, or just to try to kick my butt as much as possible, which it sounds like you've experienced a little bit of. So, I think the other sort of strange 2020 circumstance has been for me, developing now the connected fitness portion of it, which we are tackling self-service and using a self-service approach plus a little bit of live as well to be able to teach people what core strength means. And it's actually a really tough thing to understand what core strength means and how we go about doing that. But so for me, I thought of our product, AXIUS Core, the board, one way pre-COVID, and I thought about it very differently post-COVID because gym went away from me, and just like everyone else in the world, and all I did was use AXIUS, and I was never in better shape just from a pure, I kept all of my muscle mass, and I was always probably scared to purely use AXIUS because I was a professional rugby player, so I used it more from a injury prevention and mobilization and core strength standpoint. And now I could very confidently say that I only use AXIUS to train, and I've kept on all of my size, and I would say my performance is increasing because of it. So it's been an interesting journey, both on the hardware and sort of the programming side, which now we're plugging into the software.
Yeah, and I think COVID has really affected different businesses in different ways. You know, we had a client that was on here a couple of weeks ago that worked in the event planning and specifically the wedding industry. And for them, you know, and they were very honest, they just said the last couple of months, they've kind of been put at a standstill. Now they were able to sell and they were able to reschedule and they actually continue to grow the business, not quite at the same rate as 2019, but they're able to push through that. From your standpoint, you know, I've seen it on Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist. You know, we bought a whole home gym when we heard about the COVID and the lockdown coming, and you know, the price of self-serve and equipment and fitness equipment has skyrocketed. Have you seen just a huge increase in demand from suddenly people going, I can work out at home and with this board, I can do everything that I need to do on this board?
Yeah, it's funny. So we launched the physical board in 2017 by a Kickstarter campaign. I would say it was a well-executed Kickstarter campaign of a fantastic product. And we got about 2,000 boards out there into the marketplace. So we did it was proof of concept for us. It was some product market fit off the bat, that what we were doing from a high level, there was application and demand for it, even though we really didn't explain it at all. We just said, here's a great thing, use it. And some people were like, wow, this is a great thing and it really works. This has to be everywhere. That was in 2017, right? I was a rookie entrepreneur. Everything I was doing was for the first time. That was from product development, IP, patent, manufacturing, distribution, supply chain, marketing, and then actually trying to put all those things together and turn it into a business. I would say we did not do that part of it. You know, we learned an incredible amount, and then I saw an opportunity. Actually, back in 2015, I had the idea for, maybe 2014, I had the idea for connectivity of the board and to be able to use the board and leverage its stimuluses to help people understand what core strength is and where they're lacking. We are not to market. We are in a bit of stealth mode, building our digital platform. Since we still have a presence that is out there, we've had a huge surge in demand for our products. You know, distributors contacting me, they want to sell it, right? International distributors and people asking just to buy it. And it would be interesting just to go and launch 1.0 all over again now. I think it would be a very different experience. I'm happy and grateful the way that, you know, my story happened to unfold. Sometimes you need a little bit of luck and convergence. But certainly we've seen, you know, just like everyone has in the connected fitness space, or I would say even the fitness space in general, there is a huge demand and need for remote training solutions.
And I love it, the way with that story, you started off with testing the market with a prototype. Now, most of our clients, they don't have a hardware integration. They're purely software plays. And you know, we can talk about it's horses for courses, isn't it? Because, you know, everyone in the software development space and everyone that launches a purely technology product goes, I wish I was just selling something that was a hardware, and I wish I was selling something solid because you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. I can get in front of someone and I can sell it. And everyone in the hardware says, I wish I was selling software because it's infinitely scalable. So you're tackling both of these problems simultaneously. The approach that you've used, though, has really been relatively similar on both of them. So with the board itself, you started off with a prototype, you tested the market, you were able to, you know, just sell 2,000 boards and be able to you know, generate revenue and show there's demand. And then with the software side of things, you've also started off with prototypes of the software. We've built your clickable prototypes, you've built out MVPs. How has the feedback and how has that enabled you to actually pivot and make changes to what this technology component that's going to, you know, complement the actual hardware?
Yeah, well, that was very eloquently put. And I will say that when you wrap it up and serve it like that, we've been doing it, let's say the correct way, right? In terms of testing before spending. In reality, it's messy. It's a messy process. And the better you get at cleaning up that messy process, I think the more successful or the quicker you'll get to market with something that is of success. The human body is incredibly complex by itself, right? I think the core is probably an unknown that the market hasn't really answered very well. People understand it very well, but from a holistic view, the market's holistic view of what core means, it's all over the map, right? And you know, you have physical therapists that understand it really well. The best trainers or athletic strength and conditioning coaches understand it really well. So can we sell the physical thing that we made and make a profit, or, you know, make some money on it? And the answer to that is yes, we can. Is there a demand for connected fitness? Absolutely, a surging demand. Is it a relevant idea to combine the two? Yes. testing the software, as Ian and the rest of the Ironforge team knows, is relatively easy. You know, does the software work? If you press this button, is there the appropriate response and reaction? And yes, then you can test the hardware, right? Like, is the connectivity working? Is it connected? Yes or no? Yes, right? When you press this button, does it do something? You know, when you press this hardware button, does it do something in the app? Yes. The human element is the variable, and figuring out how to test the human element efficiently is very challenging when you introduce other variables such as hardware and software. So it's been incredibly complex. I think that some of the best things we've done right now is bringing intelligent people into the project that understand the body and are like-minded and are open-minded, because there's a lot of people that have opinions about how the body works and the best way to go about training them. So I would say that what we've done in the last 3 to 6 months, is really built a team that sees the vision, understands what we're trying to do for the broader market of introducing what core strength is, and make that scalable with a self-service solution, and then building a program, right? And the program is really the glue that holds together the hardware and the software. So how we go about communicating, and really it's a communication game. How do you communicate simply what your program is to your users so they definitively know exactly what to do? And the most important part, can they feel it, right? If we tell them they should feel this, do they yes or no? And that is the biggest variable of all, right? Can you get someone to feel inside their body what you want them to? And if you can, you win. And if you can't, you lose. So, and there's lots of different ways about going about that, but it's been a fantastically interesting, difficult, and messy process.
And I think when you're, with the, like you say, with the hardware and the software, you can test that. Does it work? Yes or no. It's very categorical. It's very black and white. When you bring in the human error, you also don't have the luxury with this product of being able to say, hey, we're just going to run AXIUS classes. We're going to have 20 people in a class, and we're going to have our office, our office down in San Diego or New York or wherever that is. And we're going to bring 20 people in, and we're just going to run classes all day. And I can provide real time feedback for you, and I can say, oh, actually, you need to lower your hips, you need to, bring it in tighter, whatever that is. You have the unique challenge of trying to do all of that and then do it virtual to potentially millions of people at the same time. So how is it you're kind of overcoming that obstacle? What does the course itself, I know you mentioned there's the coaching in there, how does that overcome that obstacle?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's real-time feedback. So how can you harness real-time feedback that helps to scale your product and build and help to test your assumptions, right? So we actually started with an accelerator back in, interestingly enough, February 20th. So I'm from New York, just outside of New York City. I lived in Manhattan for 6-7 years before moving out to San Diego. My engineers are based in San Diego. We headquartered AXIUS in San Diego, which is where I am right now. I joined an accelerator program, a consumer goods accelerator based in New York City, and they deal with technology and retail. So consumer brands, really industry almost agnostic. And Pano is the director there, and he's a wealth of knowledge. And the annoying part about Pano is anytime I think he doesn't understand what we're trying to do, he's 2 steps ahead of me in terms of predicting a potential problem. So he's been a massive component of test in live. And I would say COVID was a bit of a blessing, but also a challenge for us because we've done a lot of live Zoom classes. Yeah. He would say not enough yet, probably, I would imagine. But live Zoom or live classes, you don't have someone in front of you. So your verbal communication cues have to be that much tighter, because you don't realize the luxury. I mean, if anyone has been a personal trainer, worked with a personal trainer, or even been coached by, a great or terrible coach, I think this is a relatable experience. They're telling you something and it just doesn't make sense. That's a very frustrating process, right? You both want the same thing, but getting there is impossible if you're not communicating well. So one of the values that we've written down on paper and we've really stuck to is all of us to keep an open mind that what might make sense to me doesn't necessarily make sense to you. Yeah. So if we use a hack, like to get people to pull their shoulder blades back and down, we've learned to tell them to corkscrew their arms, and that connects with what we need them to do, which is turn your arms this way so that your shoulder blades go back and down, right? And that had to be learned in a live setting. So those types of hacks, even though they're simple communications and it's, you think it's a technology play, it's just simple communication and getting it right. And then getting a user's feedback that worked. This didn't, that did, and doing that over and over and over again. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's a process of just practicing and waiting until you get it right. And it's not going to happen the first time. And I'd like to give some context because I think a lot of the people that we've had on this podcast so far, and a lot of our, especially clients that are coming to us that are relatively greener entrepreneurs, they're newer entrepreneurs, perhaps they're in the first year of really starting their business. Now, you're not in your first year. You've been doing this for, like you said, a couple of years now. This is your third or fourth year that you've been doing this business. Talk me through how the progression over the last couple of years has come about, and really that first year, the obstacles that you had to overcome when you were first starting this. Because as you go through business and as your startup gets larger and larger and you raise more capital and you become more successful, your problems get a little bit easier. You still have problems, but how does getting through that first year, what were the main obstacles that you had to overcome that perhaps some of our other listeners and other clients that are currently facing?
So I look at it differently now than I did when I was going through them, right? And I think if you have an idea, so I started out with an idea on a napkin, right? And it was a concept that I drew and I said, this is a great idea. This should be a thing. Which isn't different from any product really, right? It doesn't matter if it's a digital or a physical. Mine happened to be a physical. The first thing that you need is validation, right? I mean, you need to know, well, there's a lot of other things that you need before that, but I think the first big inflection point that should you go forward in this concept, should you continue to push it forward with everything in your body and your being, is some form of validation. You have to figure out what that validation is, right? Now, there's no better validation than sales. Right? And that's why software people hate, are jealous of hardware people, because I could actually control my own destiny with sales of hardware to prove that my product belongs, right?
Yeah.
In software, you're trying to get users, right? So, do we have people using our thing and are they engaging with it? How often, right? So both of those 2 points, validation feels really good as an entrepreneur. Like you need that, confirmation that you're going in the right direction. So for us, that took shape really in a Kickstarter, which probably was a false blanket of comfort that we wrapped around ourselves at the time. So there's the rub, right? You get some validation, and as the roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship is low lows, high highs, right? So we were up here when we launched, and we had a thing that was a great idea. I had the head strength and conditioning coach for the Mets and the Red Wings come on and become a partner in the business and telling me it was the smartest thing in the world. And we went out there into the world and we said, here it is. And we ended up pre-selling 1,000 of them, $250,000 in sales in a month. It's a great story. That was the end or culmination of a very long road to get there, just to get there. And like I said, it was probably false sense of security at the time. We had a lot more learning to do. And there's product validation, and then there's business building, and business building is different from product testing.
And that's the thing, you can have the greatest product in the world and you can have a terrible product and a great salesperson, and you can get to that first step, and it really is a ladder. It's rungs on the ladder, and you can get the first couple of steps and you can fall very easily. And it's being more of a seasoned entrepreneur now, being in that situation where you've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, you're now at a point where hopefully someone's you're looking back and saying, I know what I did wrong there, I know what I did right there, and that's something that you can learn from going forward. I know with myself, going from Recruit to now with Iron Forge, with Recruit you can sell it all day long, and I was able to sell software, but the software was never really at the point where I needed it to be. And now having selling software development as a whole, now we're working with obviously clients that are in very much situations, and we're able to coach them through what we went through. Now, one of the things that I did talk with one of my colleagues who was an ex-college athlete, he was a swimmer in college, I was a soccer player in college. You are a level above where we were, as a professional rugby player, played for the US men's rugby team. How important, and being an athlete, how important and how much of an advantage do you feel that you have becoming an entrepreneur? Because for me, I think it's huge. How important do you think is being an athlete to being able to just smash through those obstacles and always be laser focused?
I agree. I think it's massively important. I think the way I look at it now is every entrepreneur has a certain set of attributes, right? I'm not an engineer. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not even a technical person. So there are plenty of attributes that I'm missing that are integral to forming a connected fitness company, right? That I don't have. But then you look at what you do have, right? And I think as an athlete, you have some raw assets that are difficult to develop unless you've earned them, right? And I would, on that side, I would put a lot of it in, it's teamwork, right? I mean, it's probably one of the biggest ones is that you can't do things alone unless you're a psycho endurance athlete that runs very long. And then you got all sorts of other wonderful attributes to leverage. But teamwork and then getting up when you get knocked down, right, are both pretty integral to being an athlete or an athlete that's ever achieved a certain level. And let's be honest, I mean, to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a certain tolerance level for pain, right? I mean, it's not an easy process. You have to have a thick skin. So, having coaches telling you what you're doing wrong and being able to be moldable. I think I saw this as I went from, in rugby, it was the same thing. I was always trying to climb the next rung, right? And I wanted to see how high I can go. I think it's recognition of the things that you are and the things that you are not. And you can get better. There's certain things that you could refine and you can get better at. Like my understanding of what it's like to engineer a product could improve, but I'm never going to be an engineer, right? So understanding that is massively important if you're going to be leading a team, understanding, the holes that you need to fill. And there's so many assumptions that I made, and, confidence is fantastic until it's not, right? And then it gets you into trouble because you really get one shot at going to market with a product, and that can be served up in different ways. And you could, especially in the fun technology world that we live in now, where you get to call things alpha, beta, and, delta, gamma, whatever, right? But you got to be careful when you're going to market because you really do get one shot. And I think I'm lucky enough where I turned my one shot into a second shot, and keep traction alive just long enough and tell a great story, and you can make some great things happen. But you need to be able to recognize, what you're not.
And you said it yourself, you're a non-technical founder. You're clearly a salesperson. You're very confident in the way that you talk. Obviously we've had multiple calls together. You are the CEO of the company. You are the face of the company. How is it when you started this, being a non-technical person whose background is predominantly in sales, that, like you say, you don't know anything about software development. You don't know how to create a board. You've never done this before. How do you convince people to join that roller coaster ride with you? Or is that just the core responsibility of the CEO to be able to sell people to really join that ride with you?
Well, so one of the things that I do think I had just automatically was passion for what I was doing, right? And I think that's a given. You need to show up passionate because it's going to be really difficult. And if you're not passionate, you're probably going to fold when things get hard, and they'll get hard multiple times. Now, I was never a technical founder as it relates to software engineering, but I was reasonably technical when it came to my understanding of the body and where my product fit into the market. So I played up my technical understanding and my ability to communicate with people like Mike Barwis. So Mike, one of the first people that mattered in terms of validation, mattered to me. I needed validation that what I was doing, it made sense to me, but I wanted to hear someone that actually was an expert. And Mike has he's the head strength coach or advisor to the New York Mets, has worked with probably more professional Olympic athletes than almost anybody on the planet. He's done a TED talk on neurological re-engineering. He literally takes spinal cord victims that are told you're never going to walk again, and he uses suspended strength training mechanisms that he's invented to allow them to regain function in their limbs. So Mike was a guy that I went to with my hat in my hand, and I said, Mike, this is what I'm doing. This is why I think the way I think. And by the way, I read a lot of your stuff and think that you think, similarly. What do you think? And he said, great, right? So I validated the technical understanding that I had, and then I learned, right? So I was constantly absorbing information in, as it related to the body. And then, jumping into sort of this idea of software, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be very absorbent in general. You have to be learning a lot. And I would say I far outshined my entry level capacity to understand things because I was forced to. And, you know, you start reading tech blogs, right? You start reading things about what is garnering investment, what's garnering attention, what's making it in the market, and why. And then I started selling my idea to really smart VCs way before I was ready to do so, which then forced me to learn technical software jargon that at first I was literally just plugging holes into a barrel. But you do that for long enough and you begin to understand, right? You have the conversations with people that are actually really smart or technical in the areas you're not, and you learn. And that's that I think the ability to be passionate, to find people that believe in your vision, and then to find other people that you know can very quickly improve upon your vision is integral.
Now, was Mike the first person that you'd approached that was really the pivotal moment for you, or had you handled rejection from people that perhaps would have been good fits that just didn't see the value in what you were doing?
Yeah, no, I remember this very clearly, actually. I'd worked on getting from prototype mode to a manufacturable mode, which is very expensive and takes a lot of time, and prototyping anything is hard, well, in the hardware world. And I had 30 units, 30 boards from our manufacturer, and I probably spent more than I should have to get those 30 boards. Not dissimilar to what we're doing right now with the connected hardware rings, right?
Yeah.
It's a prove it before you do it. And I think I had 30 or 25. Yeah, I had 25 or 30 boards, and I sent them out to the people that I thought were, maybe I sent 10 out to people that I thought were thought leaders in the space, and there were a lot of guys that were really interested, that thought it was great, but didn't want to get their hands dirty, right? It just seemed like a difficult task. And there were other guys who flat out told me, like, I don't see it, right? So that's hard when in your mind, well, in my mind at the time, I thought, man, this is a no-brainer. It's a home run. And I was as confident as possible. And then you send it to an industry expert, and I won't drop names, but I sent it to someone that was probably the guy in terms of like teaching fitness coaches in America, and he said, I don't see it. And that was and I sold him. I said, no, you have to get on the phone with me. We have to talk about this. We went back and forth, and he said no. So and that was a great lesson, right? Because I came to find out that there are reasons for people shutting down certain things, right? There are reasons that people like, this investment or hate that investment. Sometimes they're protecting things that they've developed, or, but regardless, there are just some people that just don't like your idea, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And, talk to the people that do. That's, your time's more valuable there.
And that's the thing. I think, any of our new entrepreneurs that are listening, or any of our new entrepreneurs that are clients that are going through this, you're going to have your first setback. Because when you start your business, everyone thinks it's an amazing idea. And you tell your mom, you tell your dad, you tell your friends, and they go, oh, this is amazing. I'll buy one. This sounds great. Let's do it. And then you get into the market. And then even then, you get a bit of validation. You start to get a little bit of traction. Then you take it to an industry expert. And that's where you get the knockdown, and with myself, with the Recruit Shoot, I was talking with professional players and Division 1 head soccer coaches. And they said, I'd never use this. Great, no problem. I'll move on to the next one then. And eventually I found a couple that said they would, and then that became a much larger audience. And it, I think from the going through that process, as an athlete, especially taking those knocks, but just as an entrepreneur, you're going to get a lot of rejection before you get that first yes. And it may be the rejection from someone that we're 100% convinced is going to be the guy, like you said, with this individual. Yeah, all your eggs are in one basket. This is the person. And then you just say, well, we'll agree to disagree then. And let's go and prove them wrong now. Does that create a chip on your shoulder? Do you hope one day to look back and say, I told you so?
No, I think I did at the time. Now, you know what? Not everyone, many people in health and wellness, they're trying to get to the right answer, right?
Yeah.
There's just many different ways to get there. So, and different folks, different strokes, like you can't, what works for me might not work for you, right? And I am trying to impact the most amount of people in the world that will allow them to understand their bodies better easily, right? I don't want to make it an arduous task that's terrible that nobody enjoys, right? So I want to say, if I put together a solution, what's the greatest impact I could have on the most amount of people that's true to my vision? That's the direction I'm going to go in. And that's been something I've tried to hold true to. And actually kind of funny, like when we did the Kickstarter, we had all these infomercial companies come running after us. They wanted to put AXIUS on television and do an infomercial. They wanted me to drop the price, from $300 to $89, $79, $99 or what have you. And it was tempting, right? Because you have with an infomercial, direct response, you can it's not overnight success, but I mean you could sell millions of units within a year. That's a big $300 million business, right? Like it's not small. It's not small business we're talking about. So there were some hard decisions that I had to make, and I think, but again, it goes back to passion and value, and vision. And that wasn't my vision.
Yeah. And I do want to change the pace a little bit here, because I think one of the things that perhaps people don't understand as well, with software, there's a cost to develop software. An app might cost $50,000. It might cost $200,000. It might cost $10,000, whatever that number is. It really depends on the scope of the work and the level and the production quality that you need for that. Now with hardware, it can be an enormous task to be able to create just a prototype alone. And I know we talked about, you being able to test different things. So I would imagine you've had to fundraise so far. Do you mind me asking how much you fundraised, to date, what your plan is for fundraising in the future? Because I know we were talking beforehand and you said you've got a lot of meetings coming up. How your experience has been fundraising so far?
Sure. Yeah. So we've fundraised just a little under $400,000. But I've done that in batches, which I would say is probably not the norm. And mostly because of the hardware component. And so we sort of had the raise A, which was, A is a terrible word to use. We had our first raise, which was friends and family, right? Traditional friends and family. And it was small checks. And really the goal was to get to Kickstarter, right? And you get to Kickstarter and you realize Kickstarter's it's not free either, right? It costs money to execute a Kickstarter campaign. So, we probably raised about half of that, maybe $200K for the hardware portion of the business. And then we raised about in equal parts as we developed the software side of the business. How I approached it both times, I really, we can get as specific as you'd like, but, convertible debt is your friend to prove concepts. I would say we've raised a very little amount of capital, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
Having, $500,000 in sales in purely the 1.0 hardware version, is a strong reason why we were able to not raise a great amount of money off the bat. When you have manufacturing just to produce one manufacturable AXIUS, you're in for $100,000. You know what I mean? Like you're pretty easily off the bat. Yeah. You want to produce one. So things could pile up pretty quick on the hardware side. When you introduce software, and we're going, now we're introducing our subscription model, things change and the position of the raise changes. The reasons why you raise capital changes. And I'd say one of the things that I consider ourselves very lucky is that we do have a hardware component, which allows us, so we make money on every sale of a unit. And then we have a lot of upside on the subscription value of a customer. And really just our job is to provide the best experience possible for that person each and every month so that they continue to provide revenue to the business, right? So it's if you get it right, it's a wonderful business because the upside revenue potential is tremendous. But your ability to actually, I dare to say turn a profit on a unit sale, that gives a lot of control when it comes to talking about raising.
Yeah, and I think the unique situation you have is you can make the profit on the board itself and then the recurring revenue on the actual application. And from an investor standpoint, I imagine that's a beautiful thing when you can see that because you're profitable every time you sell a board. And then anything on it, like you say, it's the tremendous upside that you have. And I think, a lot of companies are nervous to get into this. I know a lot of people refer to it as more the Peloton model, being able to put the hardware in there and then you can, have the subscription on top of that. Have you started to test the demand for the subscription based? I know right now you're doing some testing with, you know, a closed kind of testing group. Have you had any pre-orders? Do you have demand for the subscription? Where have you seen that go so far with the feedback?
Yeah, so I mean, we see the demand is there. It's palpable. Like it. So again, the way that I initially started thinking about this business was let's sell boards, right? It's a very single directional sort of approach. How do I sell a board, right? And the way you sell a board is you give value, right? You don't sell a board to someone. You improve their life with the board, right? That's very simply, if you can improve their life with the board, you'll sell the board. We plan to improve people's lives with these boards. How? Through our programming. How are we distributing our program is through the subscription model, right? So yes, we've been testing the board. And like you said, with Recruit Shoot, we could sell a board all day long. I can go into a gym and I can sell a board, right? That's the easy part. But the hard part is keeping them going, having them understand how to use it and when to use it and for what, right? That's the complicated part, which we probably have a lot of similar war stories in that. So we've turned to our original customer base, right? I've sold 2,000 boards. That's a massive asset, right? To have 2,000 customers with, I think 2,300 people floating around the world that have an AXIUS Core in their home. To test demand, we've actually engineered prototype rings. So I guess if it's all right, I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So, you know, the board is like the planet Saturn. Now we're dropping a ring on top of planet Saturn. So it goes around the dome, and basically the ring, it's a motion sensor. So we're able to tell when you're tilting the board, and the object really is to keep the board level as you're training. So the more the board is level, the more you're using your core to control that levelness. So we're putting LED lights on the board, and the LED lights turn red, yellow, and green. Green when you're level and red when you're not. And we're collecting that data. So it's a data collection mechanism that allows us to understand where our users are weak and then show them how to improve, right? That's the basic concept of what we're doing now. So we took the boards, we took our current customers, we retrofitted them with what we're calling 1.5 rings. So we have 20 of these 1.5 rings out there in the world right now, some really interesting people, some really smart people. And, you know, we're testing the components of the solution piece by piece, and we're finding, I mean, the feedback is fantastic, right? I mean, the awesome. People are feeling their bodies differently for the first time, and we're asking them, what would you pay for, right? In terms of service, right? Would you pay for self-service? Like, would you like it to be self-service? Absolutely yes. Would you pay X dollars a month for this as self-service? Absolutely yes. Would you pay for optional live classes? Absolutely yes, I would. And we're learning what our consumers want now as opposed to telling them what they need, right? And one of the things that we've learned is that core strength is important for just about every activity in the world, but the application of core strength is very different. So we do not view our users as AXIUS users. We view our users as golfers. We view our users as people that enjoy Pilates and mat classes, people that really enjoy yoga and mind body, people that enjoy endurance sports. And that is the way that we communicate to our users. So we're curating optional classes that people are willing to show up to because it's more impactful to their lives. It will actually provide them the outcome that they're looking for. So we've seen lots of demand, and we're trying not to approach it the same way that Peloton is doing it. You know, because we want to give specific value as opposed to just saying we're connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're testing the actual software itself, when you're getting feedback, was that something you leveraged a clickable prototype to be able to get that feedback? Was that more just talking about the concept? How were you able to actually gather that feedback?
So Iron Forge, you guys have been the perfect partner at this stage of the game. Because it's easy to talk about, you know, what you're going to do. It's very difficult to make the jump and show it, right? Now you're talking about another investment. Now you got to talk about engineers and scope and how big should the scope be? And really, I'd say how big should the scope be especially when there's a hardware component, is critical,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to make sure that if you have, let's just say, 3 variables: hardware, what are you doing with the hardware, and the software, right? The bigger the scope is, the more confusing those variables get, and
Yeah.
where are the leaks, right? And it could be in any one of the 3 buckets. So when I first sat down with you guys, if you remember, we developed a pretty outrageous scope. It was the Peloton for core strength, and it was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. And you know, I think what I learned, and what we all learned, was really small, and designing before you build, just like prototyping anything, is critical to learning that. Because if I had, said, if I had put a $300,000 investment into, the implementation of a software scope that was just too big, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
And I asked for it, you guys gave it to me, and it taught me a lesson. And now we're able to do the same exact thing. So we design first. I'm able to show in a clickable prototype, this is what we're thinking about doing. And then I get 20 users that say, well, I like this, but I don't like that. And I would change this. And then Ian yells at me because, his designs are always and then Ian and we talk about it, and we come to really concrete directives that are consumer driven, and not and I think we all have a vision. And I know Ironforge does. And one of the reasons I love working with Ironforge is because the development team, they share in that vision, and they try to enhance it. And I think what's been an interesting part of my learning process now is including your customers on that visionary journey, and figuring it out. And a clickable prototype really does help to do that, as opposed to, hey, look at our vision, isn't it great? And then they say, well, I would change X, Y, Z. And then you're like, okay, well, that's a rebuild. It's a redesign.
It's just a lot easier to have the like you said, the visual representation in front of you, and rather than just in screenshots, wireframes, which has kind of been the way in the past. With a prototype, you can click through it and you can actually see what it's going to do. And I mean, you worked at Ironforge for a couple of years now, and I think, you've done design, you've looked at different builds, you've done other designs, you've then done a discovery process, then you've done another design. You've gone through a couple of different processes with Ironforge. Now, in 2020, we introduced the discovery process. So that was something you hadn't had to go through at the when you first worked with us, when you were first looking at doing this, and then you came back in, I think it was May time this year, and said, hey, we want to do this. Great, we actually now need to start with the discovery. How did you find going through that discovery process, actually as an existing client rather than a new client, actually going through that 2 to 3 week process to flush out some of the ideas before we even get into designing or developing anything?
Yeah, essentially what the discovery process translated to me as refine your concept, right? And that it came through very clearly to me that it was a concept refinement, and really hits at MVP, right? Minimum viable product. And if you have an MVP, you have to be able to, in writing, be able to detail what that concept is. And it's a communication game, and getting this right, communication within your team. And I consider Ironforge a part of my team now, so being able to communicate exactly what we need and why, that's critical. And that process helped me to do that.
Yeah, awesome. No, I just think it's interesting going from having done it to then having to start discovery. Now with all of our
and to your point, to probably more towards your question, having done it without it the first time, you put 3 entrepreneurs in a room together, 2 of which are engineers, software engineers, and one of which is a insane, we could do anything, former athlete that has some pretty crazy ideas. You end up with a pretty big, wild scope that is fantastic, and that is probably not as actionable as going through a process that forces hard questions to be asked before you go to market, as opposed to after.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it saves a lot of the headaches that a lot of entrepreneurs that go straight into an MVP, because we always get asked that question: why do I need to build a prototype? Why do I need to do discovery? I know what I want to build, and can you guys just build it for me? And how much is it going to cost? To which, my answer is in the sales department is, first of all, I have no idea what you're trying to build. There are so many variances, and there is such a variety of when somebody can describe the exact same product to me 2 different ways, and it could range from $20,000 to $200,000. I have absolutely no idea what you're trying to build unless we go through this discovery. And I think with the hardware, you can see it, and like you say, it's easier to sell it. You can quantify it. You can see how it's going to work. With the software, there are so many tangents and things that you can bring in and things you want to integrate and things you want to add on to the software, that unless you really understand what that product roadmap looks like and where to have those dividing lines of, you know, the IPR, the initial product release, the version 1.0, the version 2.0, unless you can have those clear lines in the sand, it can become quite a large product and quite overwhelming very quickly.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's barrier to entry, isn't it? Hardware, the barrier is very high. In software, it's very low. So to say, do this, it's super easy just to say, yeah, go do this, right? And then someone does what you ask for. And like you said, the scope's $250,000. So what am I going to do with that? I don't have $250,000. They say, well, this is what you asked for. So and listen, this is something I'm still refining. And you know, it's mystifying when you get into software. I mean, when you really get into building your product on the software side, where and why to focus, right? Where to focus and why are you focusing there? And you got to go back to, I mean, for me, my North Star is what will add the most amount of value to my customer, right? So, but again, we are in a position right now where we're not at market yet. So we are looking for validation in different ways than the first time, right? We're looking for validation around clarity of understanding of programming, right? Clarity around, I know that, you know, the advanced user is going to get it, but will the user that, you know, maybe is not so advanced get it, right? So that's my North Star now in terms of development, but it's not an easy, I don't envy your job. Let's put it that way.
No, fortunately, I don't do a lot of development or any of the development for that matter. So it's people that are far smarter than me that deal with a lot of that. The one final question I have, because I do want to be sensitive of your time and respect that you are very busy, is from your standpoint as a more seasoned entrepreneur now, you've been through this process. What advice do you give to people that are, you know, in that first year, that are starting off, that are really looking at smashing through those barriers? If you could look back to yourself, you know, 3-4 years ago, what would you be saying to yourself?
Are you truly passionate about it? I think is the first thing. And I mean, really, really question that. And if the answer is no, that's okay, right? That tells you, do I have an exit opportunity here, right? And exits look very different for very many people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So that's the first thing is how passionate are you about this? How long do you want to spend on it, right? Which is kind of in the same vein. And then if you decide, you know, like me, that this is something that you are, you know, through the roof passionate for, my advice would be to surround yourself with great counsel, and ask the hard questions to them, and know that their answers might not be what you want to hear, and you might not even fully understand or appreciate their answers, but spend a lot of time thinking about their answers. So I think having wise counsel, you don't want to be in two minds, but there's so much, you know, and I think of the diagram, like here are the things that I know, here's the things that I don't know, and here are the things that I don't know that I don't know, right? Yeah. So what you don't know that you don't know are the things that you need to constantly be asking, looking for the things that you don't know. And honestly, that's where experience pays. So I would say wise counsel. And then once you get through the wise counsel, just go for it, right? Like at the end of the day, you just gotta go for it. You know, we would say in rugby all the time, if you're going to screw up at 100%.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out of your hectic schedule to sit down with me for this quick interview. We will be posting this video next week. If you are out there listening and you are an entrepreneur, investor, one of our clients, and you would like to be featured, please feel free to reach out to me at roach@ironforge.co. Otherwise, stay healthy and we will see you next time. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Bye.